If every correction feels like rejection, you may believe in grace without yet living from the security of sonship. You may know the language of acceptance and still possess the reflexes of abandonment. You may declare, I belong to God, when everyone is affirming you, then question your entire identity the moment someone confronts you. That is the contradiction. Many believers celebrate grace when grace comforts them, but resist grace when grace corrects them. They shout about belonging when a door opens, then assume they have been forgotten when the door remains closed. They welcome promises but become defensive when preparation demands a change in conduct. In other words, their confidence is strong in celebration but weak under examination. Now look at this carefully. You can build a beautiful house on an unstable foundation. The walls may be impressive. The furniture may be expensive. Everything may look secure until pressure arrives. Pressure does not invent the weakness. It exposes it. In the same way, correction reveals what applause can conceal. If your identity depends on approval, confrontation will feel like an attack. If your peace depends on immediate progress, delay will feel like abandonment. So examine 4 moments in your life. What happens when you are confronted? What happens when you are disciplined? What happens when you are delayed? What happens when you are required to change? Do you listen or immediately build a defense? Do you reflect or begin assigning blame? Do you prepare during delay or accuse God of forgetting you? Do you change your conduct or protect an old version of yourself simply because it is familiar? Let me tell you the principle that will govern this entire teaching. Grace establishes your belonging, but correction prepares you to carry responsibility. Correction does not necessarily mean that you are being removed. It may mean that you are being developed. It may be evidence that your future requires more character, more discipline, more wisdom, and more emotional government than your present habits can sustain. Perhaps the deepest pain is not always coming from what was said. Sometimes the pain comes from the meaning insecurity assigned to what was said. You heard, this behavior must change, but fear translated it into, you are no longer wanted. Before we decide that correction is rejection, therefore, we must separate 2 experiences that insecure people often confuse. We must distinguish condemnation, which attacks identity, from correction, which addresses conduct. Condemnation and correction may both make you uncomfortable, but discomfort does not make them identical. One attacks the person, the other addresses the pattern. One produces hopelessness, the other creates a pathway toward maturity. If you confuse them, you will either accept shame that grace never assigned to you, or reject instruction that your future desperately needs. Condemnation is a verdict against identity. It says, you failed, therefore failure is what you are. You made a mistake, therefore you are beyond restoration. Notice what it does. It joins conduct to identity and locks the door. It leaves you ashamed, isolated, and convinced that change is impossible. Correction operates differently. Correction says this decision was unwise. This habit is destructive. This response does not agree with your calling. This direction must change. Correction is specific because its purpose is not destruction. Its purpose is alignment. Condemnation says you are beneath hope. Correction says your present conduct is beneath your capacity. Let me answer you with a simple picture. Suppose a traveler carries a compass that has been damaged. The compass begins pointing in the wrong direction. Do you throw away the traveler? Of course not. You recalibrate the compass because the traveler has somewhere important to go. The adjustment is not evidence that the traveler is hated. The adjustment is evidence that the destination matters. That is the function of grace. Grace does not pretend a broken compass is accurate. Grace rescues the traveler from the verdict of being permanently lost. Then truth corrects the instrument guiding the journey. Forgiveness removes the old sentence, but training confronts the patterns that cannot accompany maturity. Grace says you still belong. Correction says now your behavior must come into agreement with who you are. So when a difficult message comes, ask 3 questions. Does this voice erase hope or invite responsibility? Does it attack my worth or identify something I can change? Does it drive me into hiding or direct me toward restoration? Now be honest. Past rejection can distort present hearing. If you were repeatedly shamed, abandoned, or valued only when you performed well, even healthy instruction may sound like an accusation. Someone says, please correct this, and your wound hears you are unwanted. That is why the mind must be renewed. You must stop allowing yesterday's injury to translate today's instruction. Reject shame, yes, but do not use grace as a hiding place from responsibility. You are not your mistake, but you are responsible for what you do after the mistake is revealed. Once identity and conduct are separated, however, another question becomes unavoidable. If belonging is already secure, why is training still necessary? Because belonging is the beginning of sonship, not the completion of maturity. You are not trained to earn a place in the family. You are trained because you already have a place, and that place carries a purpose. Now consider a household. A stranger may pass by the house and receive no instruction concerning its values, resources, or future. But a child who will one day represent that household must be taught. Why? Because the family has invested identity, trust, and expectation in that child. Instruction is not proof that the child is unwanted. It is evidence that the child's future matters. Secure identity answers the question, who am I? Correction answers a different question. Does the way I am living agree with who I am? Do not confuse those questions. When conduct is corrected, identity is not necessarily being cancelled. In fact, conduct is often corrected because identity has already been established. This is where many people create a false choice. They say, if grace is real, discipline should not be necessary. No. Grace without formation can become permission to remain immature. Then another group says, if discipline is necessary, I must earn love through performance. No. Discipline without grace becomes fear, anxiety, and religious acting. One produces entitlement, the other produces slavery. Neither produces mature sonship. Grace says you belong. Discipline says now become dependable. Grace gives you a future. Correction prepares you for it. Grace removes the verdict against you. Training develops the character within you. You understand what I am saying? God does not expose a weakness merely to embarrass you. Loving correction looks beyond the habit and sees the capacity the habit is obstructing. Your comfort may want to be left alone, but your purpose cannot afford that luxury. If greater responsibility requires greater wisdom, then accountability is protection. If influence requires emotional stability, then restraint is protection. If leadership requires integrity, then the boundary you dislike may be protecting the future you keep praying for. Purpose changes the meaning of discipline. Without purpose, sacrifice feels like punishment. With purpose, sacrifice becomes preparation. Without purpose, a closed door feels insulting. With purpose, it may become a classroom. Without purpose, correction feels like someone is taking something from you. With purpose, you begin to see that something is being built in you. So stop asking only, am I still accepted? If grace has established your belonging, ask the mature question, what is this season preparing me to manage? Now you see why correction may be evidence that your future matters, not proof that your place has been withdrawn. But this understanding produces two very different responses to the same instruction. The response of an insecure servant and the response of a secure son. Imagine two people receiving the same difficult instruction from the same leader in the same room. The words are identical. The standard is identical. The opportunity to grow is identical. Yet one leaves offended and the other leaves equipped. What produced the difference? Not the instruction, the interpretation. The insecure servant hears, this work needs improvement, but translates it as, I am being replaced. He hears, you must become more consistent, but translates it as, my value has been reduced. Immediately, fear enters the room. Even if fear is wearing a necktie and calling itself wisdom, he begins building a defense before the leader has finished speaking. Then the explanations begin. You do not understand the pressure I was under. Other people made mistakes too. Why are you speaking to me? Nobody appreciates what I have done. If explanation fails, he blames. If blame fails, he compares. If comparison fails, he withdraws. If withdrawal fails, he attacks the messenger. And sometimes he performs better for a few days, not because character has changed, but because he is trying to recover approval. Now place the secure son in the same chair. He feels the discomfort. Security does not remove emotion, but his inner conversation is different. My place is not being negotiated, so I can examine this honestly. If there is truth here, I can use it. If there is error here, I can release it without losing myself. So he listens until the instruction is complete. He asks, what specifically needs to change? What effect did my conduct have? What would improvement look like? He separates the tone of the messenger from the truth in the message. He accepts responsibility where responsibility belongs, makes the adjustment, and remains relationally present. He does not disappear because one conversation became uncomfortable. Do not misunderstand secure sonship. It is not passivity. It does not submit to manipulation or accept every accusation as truth. A mature person can say, that claim is inaccurate, without becoming unteachable. Security gives you the strength to reject what is false and still receive what is useful. Here is the distinction. The servant protects an image. The son develops character. The servant fears exposure. The son values growth. The servant wants approval. The son wants alignment. The servant asks, how do I look now? The son asks, who am I becoming next? Examine your pattern. When corrected, do you become curious or combative? Do you seek clarity or collect allies? Do you make adjustments or prepare arguments? Do not call defensiveness strength. Strength can remain open without collapsing. But interpretation is only the beginning. What controls your emotions during correction will eventually control the decision that follows. Therefore, we must move from secure identity to inner government. Correction can awaken powerful emotions. You may feel embarrassed because a weakness was seen. You may feel afraid that respect will be lost. You may become angry because the timing or tone seemed unfair. You may feel grief, disappointment, or the sudden memory of someone who rejected you years ago. Those feelings are real. But real does not mean qualified to rule. Maturity is not the absence of emotion. Maturity is the ability to prevent a temporary emotion from making a permanent decision. You can feel anger without destroying a relationship. You can feel embarrassment without abandoning an assignment. You can feel disappointment without rewriting your identity. Now notice the danger. If one person's criticism can control your peace, that person has gained influence over your inner life. If one delay can convince you that you have no value, circumstances have become the source of your identity. If one correction can make you quit your purpose, your emotions are not serving you, they are governing you. Scripture compares a person without self-control to a city whose walls have been broken down. A city without walls is exposed. Anything can enter, and anything valuable can be carried away. In the same way, a life without inner government is exposed to impulse, offense, distraction, manipulation, and avoidable loss. One comment enters, and your peace leaves. That is not freedom. Reaction and government are not the same. Reaction speaks before it understands. Reaction answers a question nobody asked. Reaction sends the message, resigns from the position, ends the relationship, and then prays for wisdom afterward. But self-government pauses. It listens. It examines. It asks, what response agrees with truth and protects my purpose? Your feelings are signals. Listen to them. Ask what they are revealing. Perhaps the anger reveals pride. Perhaps the fear reveals insecurity. Perhaps the grief reveals an old wound that still needs healing. But do not put a signal on the throne. Emotions can provide information. They cannot be allowed to issue every command. So when correction comes, practice this immediately. First, breathe. Second, refuse instant retaliation. Third, name the emotion. I feel exposed. I feel threatened. I feel angry. Fourth, restate the actual issue without exaggeration. Not, nobody values me, but a specific behavior has been questioned. Finally, postpone major decisions until wisdom, not injury, is speaking. Being emotionally affected does not make you immature. Even strong people feel deeply. The issue is whether the feeling becomes your master. You can feel the emotion and still govern the decision. And once your emotions are brought under government, you are prepared to examine one of the most misunderstood forms of correction: delay. Delay is dangerous when insecurity becomes its interpreter. The door does not open, the promotion does not come, the prayer is not answered on your timetable, and immediately the mind announces a verdict: I have been forgotten. I have been rejected. I have been denied. Then you look sideways and make matters worse. Someone else advances. Someone else receives recognition. Someone else seems to enter the opportunity you expected. Now delay becomes comparison. Comparison becomes resentment, and resentment begins questioning your worth. But listen carefully. A changing circumstance does not change your identity. A delayed opportunity cannot cancel your value. A closed door cannot rewrite your belonging. Delay may affect your schedule, but it does not possess authority to define you. Sometimes delay is not a courtroom issuing a sentence. It is a classroom developing capacity. You keep asking for greater responsibility, but greater responsibility requires a greater person internally. If opportunity becomes larger while character remains small, the blessing may become a burden. Influence can magnify insecurity. Freedom can expose indiscipline. Resources can enlarge poor judgment. Receiving more is not always the same as being ready for more. Consider a tree. Everyone admires the branches because the branches are visible, but the branches can carry weight only because roots were developed where nobody applauded. Hidden growth is not wasted growth. The season beneath the surface may be preserving the future above it. And delay reveals things. It reveals impatience. It exposes entitlement. It uncovers comparison, inconsistent discipline, dependence on recognition, and a weak tolerance for ordinary faithfulness. You thought you were merely waiting for an opportunity, but the waiting showed you what the opportunity would have placed under pressure. The insecure servant uses delay to complain about access. The secure son uses delay to develop readiness. The servant watches what everybody else is receiving. The son manages what is already in his hands. The servant says, when I receive more, I will become responsible. The son says, I will become responsible now so I can be trusted with more. Ask yourself the governing question. What kind of person must I become to handle what I keep requesting? That question turns waiting into preparation. But do not romanticize every delay. Sometimes the problem is not mysterious preparation. Sometimes it is poor preparation. Disorder may need correction. A neglected skill may need development. An avoided responsibility may need to be carried. Maturity asks both questions. What is this season producing in me? And what have I failed to do within this season? Stop waiting passively. Stop measuring your progress by another person's timing. Prepare honestly, manage faithfully, and let hidden growth become visible capacity. Preparation, however, becomes real only when correction is converted into repeated discipline rather than temporary inspiration. Hearing correction is an event. Becoming corrected is a process. You can agree with every word, take excellent notes, nod your head until your neck becomes tired, and still remain unchanged. Agreement is not transformation. Insight must become practice before it becomes character. Notice the sequence. Instruction gives you truth. Reflection makes the truth personal. Decision gives the truth authority. Repetition turns the decision into a habit. Habit shapes character. Character creates dependable capacity. That is how correction moves from something you heard to something your life can demonstrate. Suppose you are corrected for being unreliable. The change is not proved because you felt sorry. It is proved when you keep the next commitment. Arrive prepared, complete the assignment, and follow through without being chased. Suppose your speech has been careless. Transformation appears when you control the next sentence, especially when anger gives you permission to say too much. Suppose distraction has been stealing your focus. Growth begins when you turn it off and finish the work while nobody is watching. Every repeated choice is training you. If you repeatedly tolerate procrastination, you are training yourself to delay. If you repeatedly tolerate defensiveness, you are training yourself to blame. If you repeatedly abandon commitments when discomfort appears, you are training yourself to associate difficulty with quitting. But the opposite is also true. Repeated listening trains teachability. Repeated follow-through trains reliability. Repeated self-control trains stability. Eventually, adjustment becomes more natural than argument. This is why discipline is not punishment. Discipline is protection. It protects your time from distraction, your relationships from unmanaged emotion, your future from present impulse, and your leadership from the loss of credibility. Feelings ask, what is comfortable now? Discipline asks, who am I becoming next? Training is rarely pleasant while it is happening. Its harvest comes later. Today it may feel like restraint. Later it becomes peace. Today it may feel repetitive. Later it becomes competence. Today it may feel hidden. Later, it becomes trustworthy conduct under pressure. And do not confuse disciplined growth with abusing yourself. You are not required to insult yourself into maturity. Healthy force says, my dignity remains intact, but this temporary resistance will not become a permanent limitation. Grace allows you to grow without hatred for the person you are growing from. Stop waiting to feel transformed before behaving differently. Sometimes corrected behavior must come first. Act with wisdom while your emotions are still catching up. Practice the new response until the new response becomes part of you. But discipline cannot transform the person who remains committed to defending the old version of themselves. The old version of you has a survival strategy. Reinterpret every challenge as unfairness, so that no internal change is ever required. If every correction is persecution, you never have to examine yourself. If every disagreement is dishonor, you never have to listen. If every failure is somebody else's fault, you never have to grow. And people will defend unhealthy behavior for years simply because it is familiar. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar maturity. So they say, that is just how I am. No, that may be how you learn to operate. Learned reactions can be examined. Learned habits can be replaced. Learned identities can mature. Now, your history matters. Perhaps you became defensive because criticism once came with humiliation. Perhaps you learned to withdraw because honesty was punished. Perhaps anger protected you in an environment where you felt powerless. That history may explain the reaction, but explanation is not ownership. Your past can tell us how the pattern began. It does not have to decide how the pattern ends. Look at the cost of defending it. The same conflict keeps appearing in different relationships. Trust becomes damaged because nobody can speak honestly to you. Instruction is lost because you are evaluating the messenger instead of receiving the lesson. Skill remains stagnant. Emotions remain unstable. Eventually, opportunities become unsafe to grant, not because you lack potential, but because your potential cannot yet be corrected. Suppose an assignment fails. Blame asks, who can I accuse so I can escape this discomfort? Responsibility asks, what must I learn so this does not happen again? Blame may protect your image for one afternoon, but it also protects the weakness that produced the failure. Responsibility may wound your pride for a moment, but it creates movement. The ego believes that admitting wrongness makes you smaller. Wisdom says the opposite. A wise person is not someone who has never been wrong. A wise person can recognize error, change direction, and become more trustworthy because truth matters more than appearance. So identify your defensive sentence. Is it, nobody understands me? Is it, they are always against me? Is it, that is simply my personality? Test that sentence. Is it protecting truth or protecting immaturity? Is it preserving dignity or preserving a limitation your future cannot carry? Your past should be a reference point, not the residence from which every new correction is interpreted. You can honor what you survived without remaining loyal to the person you had to become to survive it. Resisting correction does not preserve your dignity. It preserves the old limitations that delay mature responsibility. Once that defense is surrendered, responsibility can take its proper place not as punishment, but as stewardship. Responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is ownership. It is the decision to own your choices, your responses, your commitments, and whatever has presently been placed in your hands. You may not be responsible for the wound that was inflicted upon you, but you are responsible for whether that wound governs what you build next. Now, responsibility does not mean isolation. We need counsel, support, encouragement, and community. But nobody can obey on your behalf. Nobody can renew your thinking for you. Nobody can practice your discipline while you remain comfortable. People can walk beside you, but they cannot carry the personal load of your maturity. This is why responsibility becomes the bridge between potential and trust. Gifting may attract attention. Charisma may open a door. Talent may create an opportunity. But reliability determines what can safely remain in your hands. Potential says, I could. Responsibility demonstrates, I can be trusted to continue. Many people desire influence, resources, leadership, and freedom. But desire does not prove capacity. Wanting a larger assignment does not mean you can manage it. Wanting authority does not mean you have learned self-government. Wanting freedom does not mean you possess the discipline required to keep freedom from becoming disorder. And responsibility is proven in small things long before it is displayed in public authority. It appears when you arrive on time, prepare before the meeting, admit a mistake without giving a speech, repair what your actions damaged, serve consistently, and fulfill a promise when nobody is applauding. These actions appear ordinary, but they are constructing evidence. Correction tests whether you want merely the title of sonship or the character capable of carrying inheritance. Everybody enjoys being called an heir. Fewer people enjoy the training required to manage what belongs to the household. An heir who thinks only about access becomes entitled. A steward thinks about preservation, service, accountability, and multiplication. Entitlement asks, what can I receive? Stewardship asks, what can I be trusted to manage? Suppose a person keeps asking for more resources while wasting the resources already present. More will not correct the problem. More will magnify it. Suppose someone prays for greater influence while refusing accountability. A larger platform will not create character. It will expose the absence of it. So ask yourself honestly, what am I requesting more of while neglecting the responsibility already entrusted to me? Your time, your relationships, your assignment, your habits, your present opportunity. Correction is not merely training you to avoid wrong behavior. It is preparing you to become a trustworthy carrier of purpose. And trustworthiness becomes especially urgent when responsibility expands into influence, because influence magnifies whatever correction has left unresolved. Influence does not automatically create maturity. Influence magnifies whatever maturity or immaturity is already present. A larger platform does not repair character. It gives character a microphone. Now consider what happens when authority expands, but correction has been resisted. Pride becomes policy. Insecurity becomes control. Offense becomes retaliation. Entitlement begins demanding loyalty while refusing accountability. The weakness that once injured one relationship can now affect a family, an organization, a ministry, or an entire community. A person may organize teams and still be unable to organize their emotions. They may address crowds and still be unable to address their own defensiveness. They may manage budgets, schedules, and major projects while remaining controlled by anger, appetite, comparison, or the need for approval. Public gifting does not guarantee private government. Pressure exposes the foundation, and success can create as much pressure as adversity. Trouble tests whether you can endure without quitting. Recognition tests whether you can advance without becoming arrogant. When people begin applauding, the ego may whisper, "You no longer need correction. Your results prove you are right." Be careful. Results can reveal ability without proving maturity. This is why teachability is essential. Teachability is strength under truth. It is the capacity to listen without collapsing, examine without pretending, adjust without resentment, and remain accountable without retaliation. A teachable person does not lose confidence when corrected because confidence is rooted in purpose, not perfection. Watch a secure leader receive input. They welcome honest questions. They do not interpret every disagreement as dishonor. They can say, "I was wrong," without writing a 12-page explanation. They change direction when evidence shows that the present course is harming the assignment. Their loyalty is not to appearing infallible. Their loyalty is to fulfilling the purpose responsibly. That kind of leader builds trust without constant self-promotion. People feel safe contributing because truth is not punished. They know the assignment matters more than the leader's image. And when the leader makes an error, prompt ownership protects credibility more effectively than elaborate denial ever could. Now take the leadership test. Who can tell you that you are wrong? Who can question your judgment without being labeled disloyal? Who can identify a damaging pattern and still remain close enough to help you correct it? If the answer is nobody, your influence has already exceeded your character. Accountability is not a threat to legitimate authority. It is one of authority's qualifications. The more influence you carry, the more valuable correction becomes, because more people can be affected by what remains uncorrected in you. But this raises a practical concern. Teachability must not become gullibility. You need a wise process for evaluating correction without becoming either defensive or easily controlled. Humility does not mean surrendering your judgment to every person with an opinion. Humility receives examination. It does not submit to indiscriminate control. A secure person can listen carefully without handing another human being ownership of identity, conscience, or direction. Begin by separating content from delivery. An impatient tone may still carry a useful truth. A gentle voice may still carry manipulation. If you judge only the tone, you may reject necessary instruction because it arrived without beautiful packaging. But if you judge only the confidence of the speaker, you may accept a polished accusation that has no truth in it. So test the correction. First, does it align with truth and the purpose you are called to serve, or does it demand conduct that violates them? Second, is the issue specific? Healthy correction identifies something that can be examined. Manipulation hides behind vague statements such as, "You always disappoint everyone." Third, is there evidence or only accusation? Fourth, does the message point toward restoration and responsible change, or merely produce shame and dependence? Fifth, is the speaker appropriately accountable, or do they demand access to your life while answering to nobody? Now place the message into three categories. What is true must be owned. What is unclear must be clarified. What is false must be released without bitterness. Do not keep poison merely because you refuse to forgive the person who handed you the cup. Ask direct questions. What specific behavior did you observe? What effect did it have? What change would demonstrate growth? Specific questions force confusion into the light. They help honest correction become useful, and they expose manipulation that depends on vagueness. But be careful. Discernment can become sophisticated defensiveness. Some people inspect the messenger until they discover one imperfection, then use that imperfection to dismiss everything. Their tone was wrong, therefore I have nothing to learn. No. The messenger may need correction, and the message may still contain truth. Maturity can recognize both. When condemnation appears, reject it. Refuse identity-level shame. Refuse hopeless labels. Refuse the suggestion that one failure has canceled your worth. Return to secure belonging. Then ask whether any conduct-level concern remains that must be addressed. You can reject the sentence against your identity without escaping responsibility for your behavior. And when the consequences are serious, or when old wounds make your perception uncertain, invite counsel from trustworthy, mature people. Wisdom does not fear another set of clear eyes. This process protects humility and boundaries at the same time. You neither swallow every accusation nor reject every correction. Discernment identifies what is true. The next step is to demonstrate that truth has become operational through visible change. Truth that never changes conduct has remained information. Correction becomes revelation when it enters your decisions and produces visible results. So let me give you a practice you can use immediately. Receive, pause, examine, own, plan, practice, and review. First, receive. Hear the complete message. Do not interrupt with an explanation. Do not construct a courtroom in your mind while the person is still speaking. Listen for the issue, the evidence, and the effect of your conduct. Second, pause. Create space between emotion and decision. Pray, reflect, breathe. Refuse to make a permanent choice while standing inside a temporary storm. The first feeling may be real, but it does not have to become the final response. Third, examine. Compare the feedback with truth, purpose, repeated patterns, and observable consequences. Is this an isolated accusation, or have trustworthy people raised the same concern? Did your conduct strengthen the assignment, or did it create confusion, injury, or delay? Fourth, own. State whatever is valid plainly. Say, I did this without adding, but you made me. Ownership is not exaggerated shame. I made an irresponsible decision is honest. I am completely worthless is condemnation. One identifies conduct, the other destroys identity. Fifth, plan. General intention produces general results. Choose one corrected behavior. Identify the trigger, the new action, the boundary that will protect it, and the person who will review it. If interruption is the problem, the plan may be, when I feel defensive, I will write the concern down, ask one clarifying question, and wait before answering. Sixth, practice. Repeat the new behavior in ordinary moments. Do it privately. Do it when nobody is impressed. Do it until the response becomes dependable rather than performative. Seventh, review. Return after an appropriate interval. Ask what changed. What still triggers resistance? What effect have others observed? What further adjustment is required? Maturity is not afraid of measurement. Apply this process everywhere. When receiving difficult feedback, listen before defending. During delay, examine readiness instead of comparing timelines. After a relational mistake, name the injury, repair what can be repaired, and change the behavior that produced it. When discipline is inconsistent, stop making dramatic promises and establish one repeatable action. A mature response may sound like this: I understand the concern. Can you show me the specific behavior and its effect? Here is what I will change. I will practice it consistently, and I will return so we can review the result. That last part matters. Return with evidence. Apology without alteration is sentiment. Tears may express sincerity, but changed conduct demonstrates understanding. Do not merely say you received correction. Let your habits, relationships, and stewardship prove it. Now the teaching can be compressed into its final identity claim. Secure sons do not merely survive correction. They use it to become trustworthy. Now bring the entire teaching together. Condemnation attacks identity. Correction addresses conduct. Grace secures belonging. Discipline forms character. Responsibility prepares authority. And teachability allows purpose to keep developing you without insecurity destroying the process. The insecure servant receives correction and asks, am I being expelled? The secure son asks, what must I learn for the good of the household? The servant protects appearance. The son prepares for responsibility. One is trying to preserve approval. The other is becoming trustworthy. So reinterpret the moments you once feared. Confrontation can become clarity. Discipline can become protection. Delay can become preparation. Required change can become transformation. The experience may still be uncomfortable, but discomfort is not proof of rejection. Sometimes it is evidence that your future is demanding a more mature response. Now examine yourself. Where do you become defensive? What correction have you heard repeatedly but continued postponing? What responsibility is waiting for your maturity? Who has permission to tell you the truth when your conduct no longer agrees with your calling? Do not leave those questions as information. Choose one valid correction. Write down the specific conduct that must change. Select the first discipline you will repeat. Then invite a trustworthy person to review the result. Do not promise everything. Practice something. Let the change become visible. Say this within yourself: I am not condemned because I need to grow. I am not abandoned because I am delayed. I am not diminished because I admit that I was wrong. My belonging gives me the security to face truth, and truth gives me the opportunity to mature. Now demonstrate it. Let correction produce calmer responses. Let it repair damaged relationships. Let it create dependable commitments. Let it produce leadership that welcomes truth and stewardship that can be trusted with more. The proof that you understood this message will not be how strongly you agreed with it. The proof will be what changes after today. Let us pray. Father, secure our identity so deeply in your grace that truth no longer threatens us. Deliver us from condemnation, but also deliver us from defensiveness. Show us the conduct that must change, the discipline that must begin, and the responsibility we must carry. Give us humility without gullibility, confidence without pride, and authority governed by character. Teach us to receive correction as preparation, to endure delay without losing identity, and to become trustworthy with everything you place in our hands. We affirm together, we belong, therefore we can be corrected. We are secure, therefore we can be honest. We are called, therefore we will prepare. Correction does not cancel sonship. It develops the character through which sonship becomes visible. Now take the first corrected step. Do not merely survive the truth. Obey it and become trustworthy.